Hi, I'm Elite Series angler Bernie Schultz from Florida, and I'm here with John Litchens, who used to run Lake X. The mystique of Lake X, as a lot of people recall, it was the testing grounds for Mercury Marine for many, many decades, and it's kind of kept its mystique even long after the departure of Mercury.
Yes, that's very true.
Tell me, when you got started out here, what period was your reign on?
Well, I started with Mercury in the late 60s, and my first trip to Lake X for testing was in the winter of 1972. And we would, because everything was frozen in Wisconsin, we'd spend like 3 weeks at a time. Be here 3 weeks, go home 3 weeks, rotate a crew, so to speak. And we did primarily engine testing, propeller testing, gear case testing, engine comparisons, variety of other tests that were litigation related.
Right.
Things like that. We did some, anywhere from a smallest engine to whatever the biggest engine was that was built at the time. And so I did that for until about 1996, when I was made manager of the race division site, that big building there, and did that for a couple of years. And then basically moved on to doing high performance endurance testing here.
Gotcha.
Did that for a little while. Some of the things we did, I don't think they let us do now anymore.
Yeah, well, that's true for a lot of things.
We used to do log strikes, like where the motel was, which is about right there where we came out. Put a log in the water and hit it with the engine.
You were testing the breakaway bracket.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember
the
that.
clamp brackets and and all those different things. The development of all that. And sometimes we would put the buoy out. Well, like I said before, there was a track, and we're right about in the middle of it here, which went all the way around the lake, marked by aluminum wing tank tips that were on poles, and had reflectors on them and so on, because the endurance boats had headlights and taillights.
And they ran 24 hours.
24 hours, yes.
Yeah.
That didn't happen all the time, and only when when the budgets were good and things needed to be done.
Right.
But there was times when there'd be as many as 20 boats running endurance on the lake, so you can understand why they needed lights.
Yeah, it's a busy place.
Yeah, and safety was of course paramount. So
Yeah.
and most of the endurance boats were all built here. They'd buy a hull, and then they'd deck them over and put a seat and a gas tank and reinforce the transom and things like that. And they had a full crew that did that. They had a kitchen for the cook that fed everybody on site.
Because it's so remote out here.
Yeah,
Back then
it would take, there was nothing in town. It would take you hours to get some lunch.
Right.
So, they just decided to kill all that travel and just, a lot of guys brought their lunch, obviously, but, you had the option of eating here if you wanted to.
It's just the history is incredible. It's Mercury's rich with history, actually. And there was a test facility, I understand, over in Sarasota, the saltwater facility.
Right.
But what really captivated me, I read the Legend of Mercury, the book that Jeffrey Rodingen wrote. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Right.
Incredibly good account of Kiekhaefer and just his history here. And one thing that really captured my interest was Project Atlas, where there was some back and forth with some competitor outboard companies, and he blamed OMC for coming up with this slanderous slogan, "Fast but won't last."
Yeah, exactly.
And it really made him mad. It kind of pissed him off, to be honest with you. And so he said, well, we're going to do this endurance test, and I'm going to have the Merc 75, which was their premier motor at the time, run 25,000 miles. That's the distance around the world at the equator. And they did that test right here, and he didn't do it with one boat, he did it with two, and it lasted 34 days of day and night non-stop running.
And then they still didn't believe him, so he did it again.
That's right, yeah.
Twice.
In fact, I think USAC, the United States Auto Club, was the sponsoring kind of the judge, the sanctioner, yeah.
Right.
And but when I read that, I was like, God, this guy went to the nth degree. I mean, nothing like that had ever been done at that time.
Right.
That was in the 50s.
Right. And refueling on the fly, you saw those pictures?
I did. In fact, I just published an article in Bassmaster.com. It's all about Lake X and Kiekhaefer, his history here, and I used that picture. And and the boats are side by side with a big tank, and they're fueling, and they swap drivers while
Right.
the boats are continuously running around the lake.
Right.
It's incredible what they did.
Yeah, like I said, some of those things I don't think the corporate world.
No, OSHA would be all over that, I'm sure.
They only used to have drivers. That's all the drivers did was drive.
Right.
And later they made the drivers mechanics. Who better to know what was going on with the product?
Yeah, that makes total
Okay.
sense.
So they would if they had a problem, they'd pull in, explain what was wrong, and they'd let the driver actually repair or change the parts. A lot of the boats for endurance had multiple test requests, so to speak. Back then, that's what they called. We still call them that today. But they might have had different spark plugs in them, different shift and throttle cable, different lube. They would, Kiekhaefer was always testing fuels and oils and things like that. In fact, I remember when I first started, I was in Oshkosh and I was in charged with getting rid of. What they would do is take the engine apart and lay it out on a board, and they had all the pistons and the crank and all the stuff internally, all inline sixes obviously, and they would wire tie them all to this thing and have a bunch of things on them. Well, they had thousands of those, thousands of them.
Wow.
It was my job to scrap them, just take the aluminum from the steel and so on. And I mean, it was amazing how much fuel and oil testing he did.
That's awesome. Well, I tell you what, why don't we just motor into the building here? We'll let our driver here take us right into the building. He can show us how that worked.
Okay.
All right.
All right.